President, please be seated. The chamber is back in session. And I give the floor to the Defense Counsel for Nuon Chiet to continue putting questions. But I would like to remind you that you have used 90 minutes already. There is 30 minutes left for your teams and the Defense Counsel for Kilsampon team.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Witness. I have some more questions that I would like to put to you. Let me start about a completely different new subject. In your WRI E3/7639, English year N 00162-739, Khmer 00162715, French 00338083. You talk about a rape that happened, a rape of a prisoner. You said one medic raped a prisoner. Do you recall saying that to the investigators?
Yes, I told the investigator that. President, Mr. Witness, please wait until the microphone tips turn red. Or you can adjust the position of the microphone. Witness. Yes, I told the investigator. The person who raped was the medic. He raped the prisoner.
Do you remember what his name was? Do you remember who the prisoner was? And do you know what happened to the medic? Did he get punished?
I cannot recall his name. And I cannot also recall the name of the victim. Later on, the medic was imprisoned and he was executed.
He was executed because of his involvement in the rape of this prisoner?
Yes.
Thank you. In your WRI, again E3/7639, this time English ERN 00162-735, French 00338-078, and Khmer 00162-712. You speak about photographing two journalists, maybe Cuban, maybe Russian. Is that something you recall having testified to the investigators of the OCIJ?
Yes, I took photos of two journalists. I do not know whether they were from Cuba or Russia. But they had one camera with them. It was either Pontac or Canon.
In your WI, you speak about a Pentax. You call it a German camera. Why did you have to examine that camera? Who gave you that instruction, and why was that?
When they were brought in, I was called to take their photos. And I knew that the camera was Pentax made in Germany.
Undoubtedly, this afternoon the prosecution will ask you about making photos of children. You, on that same page of your WRI that I just referred to, you said that you never photographed any children. Is that correct?
I never took photos of children. When they were brought in small number, I rarely went to take photos. Only when large numbers of people were brought in that I was called to take photos.
I understand. Now, you were the main person responsible for developing the negatives of those photos. I realize that thousands of negatives were developed, but do you recall ever having seen children on those negatives?
There were too many photos beyond my recollection. I rarely saw the big number of children.
So while developing photos, you do remember seeing, in rare occasions, photos of children. Are you able to somehow attribute a percentage in terms of how many children you developed, how many negatives with children on it you developed in terms of the total amount of photos?
Based on my estimate, only about 10% of them.
Would it be possible that it would be between 1.5 and 2%?
President, Deputy Co-Prosecutor, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. He asked the question. The witness gave him an estimate. He doesn't like the answer, and now he's trying to lead the witness with his own number. This is a leading question.
If there is a basis for the percentage, then please present it.
Well, we actually counted them. I'm allowed to ask a leading question after having asked an open question first. But, Mr. Witness, is it possible that your percentage of 10 could be a little bit high, and that it is a more 1 or 2 on every 100?
I saw them during developing the negatives, but not during the developing the photos. They were brought in with their parents. But I did not see their numbers in hundreds. They were in the number between 5 and 10 children.
Do you recall ever seeing these children back at Prey Sar when you were there?
nó không râm rạ.
I never saw them there. Perhaps they were with the female units, but for the male unit, I never saw them mingling with them. At Preso, there were 2 units, the male one and the female ones.
Thank you. Now let me move on to some questions in regards the other cadres working at S21. We briefly mentioned Duik. You've also mentioned in your WRIs 1 or 2 times the number 2 of S21, Hor. Do you recall Hor?
Chẳng.
Yes, I can recall him.
And what is it that you can recall about him?
When I was at S21, Hall was the deputy chief. Hall has one eye blind. When the Vietnamese entered the country, we escaped to the mountain. And Hall and Duc at that mountain, they were not get along with each other well.
Do you know anything about the division of tasks and responsibilities between Duik on the one hand and Hor on the other hand?
At that time, I did not pay attention to their roles. I only received their order. For any affairs beyond that, it was between them and the Ministry of National Defense. I heard Dutch call Takong, and based on some of my own research, Takong may be Son Sen.
Let me read to you a few excerpts from Duik's testimony about the division of tasks and responsibilities between him and Hor. I will read 2 or 3 or 4 relatively short quotes. Quotes that he all confirmed a few months ago in this courtroom. Let me, to make it a little bit understandable, first read the quotes and then I will give you all the excerpts. Mr. President, if you allow me. So Duik said about Hor that quote, I only took personal charge of important detainees. For the others, it was Hor who took charge of the details. Hor took care of the Phnom Penh sector in every field, interrogation, as well as document reading. Anything that happened in the Phnom Penh sector would go through Hor before it would reach me. Hor, he managed all the daily activities at S21. He was always occupied. That was the truth. And for simple combatants, Hor controlled everything and could order torture. Now again, I will give you all the places where you can read those quotes. Mr. Witness, before I do this, can you give me a reaction? Is that an accurate description of the division of tasks between Hor and Duik?
President, Deputy Co-Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Yes, I don't understand waiting until after the witness has answered the question. The reason for providing the ERNs and references is that so that the rest of us in the courtroom can check. So I'd ask that you do that before the witness answers the question.
It's just a lot of numbers, a little time, and but
Just provide the numbers.
all right. E3/5748, English 001-53568, French 001-3445, Khmer 001-53459. 2 E3/1570, English 001-54193, Khmer 001-54223,
លោកមីធាវីសូមលោកអានលេខអនបានយឺតបន្តិចដើម្បីសម្រួលដល់អ្នកបកប្រែ
President, please slow down the EON numbers so that the interpreter can follow.
The second E3/1570, English 001-54193, Khmer 001-54223, French 001-54208, E3/5792 at 11:43 in the morning, E3/5771, English 001-85500, Khmer 001-85492, French 001-85509. And as said only a few months ago in this courtroom, all those excerpts were read out and confirmed by Duik. Nevertheless, Mr. Witness, I hope you still recall what I just read out to you. Basically, it boils down to Duik saying that Hor was responsible for the not so important prisoners. He ran the daily operation in Phnom Penh. For simple combatants, Hor controlled everything. Is that correct? Or do you have a different view?
I did not grasp it. I did not know about the division of roles and tasks among the two people. Duke often came into contact with Hor, but I did not know what's going on between them.
Fair enough, no problem, Mr. Witness. Let me move to my next subject. You mentioned another cadre working in S21 called Sri. Do you remember a person named Sri? Sri. I'm not quite sure if I pronounce it well.
Sri was a party member. He was in charge of guarding the senior leadership. He came to ask for the paper and for the camera, and he said that it was the order from Duke, so I gave those instruments to him.
So was he needing those cameras for his tasks in relation to the important prisoners?
Usually, I was the one who took photos and developed the negatives. I had no idea why he was sent in to ask for the paper to develop photos and the camera. Perhaps there were senior people who were brought in, because I myself never took photos of senior people.
Is it your assumption that he was the one taking the photos of the incoming important prisoners? In other words, that he had your task when it comes to photographing of the important prisoners?
Yes, I and my team member never took photos of people with senior positions.
Did you or your two team members, Song and Nit, ever take photos of dead prisoners?
Yes, on some occasion, after those prisoners were beaten deaths, and then we were asked to take photos. They died in the detention facility.
I have some questions about that, but I will skip them because of time. Mr. Witness, did you ever photograph Vietnamese military prisoners?
Yes, I took their photos.
What is it that you recall about taking those photos? Were they soldiers? Were they officers? Do you remember who they were? What kind of soldiers they were?
Those who were brought in wore Vietnamese clothes. I took their photos, the upper half of their body, just like normal prisoners.
Were there ever instances that people who were not really Vietnamese soldiers were forced to wear a Vietnamese uniform, or did that never happen?
I did not know.
Let me skip some other subjects as well, and let me ask you some final questions. This morning, you identified the house where you, Song, and Nit were living, and where you were using the dark room to develop the negatives. You said that that house was close to Duik's house, about 50 or 70 meters northwest, Street 348, excuse me. Do you recall also a house which is now known as the Beehive radio station, close by Street 360, where prisoners who had arrived were assembled? Do you remember such a building?
In August, I went there, but I cannot recognize it. I only remember that it was close to the sewage canal, but now the landscape changed dramatically.
August, you mean August this year, last month?
The interpreter cannot hear. When I went there, the landscape changed completely. There were so many houses now.
Indeed, but my question was, when you went to the Beehive radio station in Street 360, was that in August of this year? So last month?
I went there with historians. Yes, it was in 2016. He asked me to go with him to tell him about the location.
That's very interesting. Mr. Witness, did you in August also visit that house that you recognized this morning, Street 348, the house where you, Song and Nit were staying? Was that still in the same condition?
It changed.
I see, with great regret, Mr. President, that my half hour is finished, so I will leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Witness.
President, thank you, Council. Next, before the chamber give the floor to the defense, to the co-prosecutor to ask the witness, the chamber would like to get observation and submission from party regarding the witness to TCW 1065. That was the in document E319/43.3.9/11. On 13 September 2016, the chamber informed the party by email about its consideration of the calling of additional witness to TCW 1065 related to the armed conflict. And we would like to invite party to give observation and submission on this issue. And now I give the floor to the Deputy Co-Prosecutor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We took a look at the WRIs of that proposed witness, and we, in our view, it seems to be a significant witness who held position on which he can speak to a number of issues, not only the armed conflict, but also the purges in the East Zone and what exactly took place in that region. So our view was that this was a good witness to select, and that he should be called to appear.
President, thank you. And the floor is given to the lead co-lawyer for civil party.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will rely on the court's discretion.
President, the floor is given to the defense counsel for Nuon Chea.
With your leave, Mr. President, I believe the Kyrgyzstan team has quite strong feelings about this, so with your leave, they would go first, and then afterwards we will go.
President, Defense Counsel for Kyrgyzstan, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, for having given me the floor. I must say that we are coming to a phase where, since we're coming to a point of making comments on talking about bringing in this witness TCW 1065 per modo of the chamber, we're getting to a point where we are quite ill at ease from the perspective of the Kyrgyzstan defense, and I will explain why. And when I say we are very ill at ease, It's because I'm trying to find the right words at this stage of the discussion. In particular, about this witness, there was some background. On 22 March 2016, which is roughly 6 months ago, 3 WRIs were communicated by the prosecution in the context of obligations of the so-called, or quote-unquote, defense information. And this follows on the decision on this, during which there was a limitation on the communications. Later, we had an update on the status concerning these communications, and since we as the defense of Kyusampand said that we felt we should be able to respond, or at least to know if the communications met the criteria that had been set by the chamber on what was meant to be communicated as being related, quote-unquote, to the defense. And as mentioned by Judge Levergne, as these documents were in the material in the shared drives and as they were not put into the file. So at the time, I sought the name, which I had later found, and the chamber, also proprio moto, also in the communications that communicated pieces of evidence by the prosecution. They decided to call Moivent. So now we're in the same situation. There are 6 months between the quote-unquote exculpatory evidence which was disclosed by the prosecution. But this was on neither the...
Please slow down a bit.
Okay.
I think the English translation has a bit of a problem in catching up.
Je vais essayer des plus.
I'll try to go a bit more slowly. So in the same way as for Mui Vani, we have a witness who was identified supposedly for the defense, and for this reason the WRIs were identified, but neither they, under 87.4, as pieces of proof, nor as identifying them to be a witness at that time. Now I note that there has been a change from the prosecution's side, but in fact, no defense team thought that it was useful or appropriate to bring this forward for the defense as exculpatory. So now we're coming to a very specific stage of the procedure. Via a decision on 30 June 2016, or a list of 30 June 2016, the Chamber, which also had had the WRI since March 2016, the Chamber did not find it appropriate to put this witness on the list of people that it expected to bring in under the armed conflict segment. So it was only on the 13th of September, 2 days ago, that we received an email indicating to NU that you plan proprio moto to bring in this witness on the basis of document 319/43.3.9-11. The chamber in the management meeting had noted that this was not something that was in the file, the case file. So the chamber went to find things that were outside of the case file into cases 3 and 4 that none of the parties had asked for. And currently, on the 15th of September 2016, we are just a few weeks shy of the end of this trial. So the first observation, since we've been asked for our responses to this decision that the chamber plans to take, if the decision has not already been taken. So the first observation from the Kyusampan team is to say that we have a true problem of a lack of judicial security in this trial. So when there was an instruction that had been underway for almost 3 years, when he had, since 2010, we had a closing order. In 2016, we're announced that there will be a witness that no one requested. So let's be clear, I understand very well that the rules of this chamber allow new elements to be introduced if they are considered useful and fundamental. And we can indeed, and this is the principle of 87.4, etc., introduce new elements, but let's not forget, nevertheless, that we are in a jurisdiction where there has been an instruction, and let's not forget that this new element is coming via a disclosure which was not meant to be as part of the file, because that's what was said at the court management meeting. And let's also not forget that it's currently 15 September 2016. So the chamber, yes, can introduce new elements, but the way in which these new elements have been coming systematically in the context of our trial poses a problem. We can note at the outcome of this the small percentage of the witnesses and documents which were in the case file of 002/2 and those which came from other investigations. And it's actually quite shocking. So yes, I concede that we can have new elements, but here I need to look on my computer. I'm sorry I didn't have time to fix it, but just looking back a little bit in your decision, where you set as 1 September, the last 87.4, that the prosecution should be able to make in the context of this trial. You say, and this is your decision, E319/47/3, and it's paragraph 23 that I will need to quote in English because I don't have a French translation.
Voilà ce que vous dites.
This is what you say. You're the ones who say it.
In any case, as the chamber approaches the close of evidence in case 02/2, there must come a point when the parties can rely upon the evidentiary record that has been established throughout the investigation and trials in this case. The value that additional evidence may have in ascertaining the truth must be weighed against the uncertainty created by allowing the admission of large amounts of new evidence near the close of the proceedings when other parties may not have sufficient opportunity to assess and respond to this information. Fin de citation.
End quote. That is what you say. Today, what I am seeing is that what you said in June 2016, saying we really need to carefully monitor the evidence that we're bringing, we're saying that what we have been speaking out against, these admissions into evidence and masses of documents who don't come from the investigation of case 02/2, which come from external cases, we are not seized of at all. So finally the chamber has understood the problem that we are experiencing, but now I'm understanding that not only has the chamber not understood this, but they are in fact contributing to the problem, because just a few weeks before the end of the trial, they ask us to have a hearing of a person that no one has asked for when since March 2016, because it's a chamber who made the WRIs of this, the co-prosecutors who made this disclosure. They knew about it and didn't want to make an 87.4 request. The defense of the accused did not have them as exculpatory evidence, and they were not aware that these had been introduced into evidence. So this is the context that I'm speaking on today, and this is why I see, if you're asking me for my observations, well, we, as the defense of Kyo Sampan, at this stage, we are not in favor of calling a witness when there are other witnesses who can talk about armed conflict from case 002/2, when we have asked from the side of the defense for TCE 87, I believe, recently, and once again, we had to re-request. But the elements in case 002/2 have not yet been decided on or are not admitted, but there's been an effort made to go find witnesses to appear from outside of the case file and that no one asked for. So I think that we can say we're very uncomfortable in the way this is being conducted vis-a-vis the preparation of the defense, looking at what evidence we need to respond to, and as a function of the closing order which we've had since 2010. So we're having a challenge here from the side of Kyo Sampan's defense. So yes, we are in this situation, and I can't say that we have any illusions as to what you're asking. If you're asking for observations, it's because the decision is already practically made. So if that's the fact, if that's the case, then we can only say that there's a real problem of legal uncertainty. So we would like to ask if the Chamber needs to call this witness, which we would consider an imposed decision, and if that's the case, we would like to have the time to properly prepare for this witness. And since I'm in a public hearing, I would like to note that it's important to recall the conditions we work under each and every day, the conditions we need to adapt ourselves to each and every day, how we need to reorganize our work, how the schedule is never held as it is because we've given this type of work to that person with consultants that are limited in number. And so when we're brought a new piece of evidence, we need to repartition the work once again, which means that what was organized is now disorganized. And the time which should have enabled us to work on the final conclusions, for example, means that we must again readapt each day to new evidence. This is not normal. It's even less normal in the case of a trial where there's been an investigation, and it's even less normal on the date of 15 September 2016. So if you plan on calling this witness, and we believe that the decision has already been made, but we'll see, we would ask for time, sufficient time to prepare. And also I would like to refer to a request that we submitted saying we want the audios that correspond to this WRI, because that's also a way to monitor the credibility and reliability of the witness. And also, since we're seeing a constant refreshing of the evidence in this trial, we'd like to know, is this the last witness that will be introduced by surprise at the last minute that we'll have in case 002/2 or not? And so I really want to remind you of this because it's something that we've been evoking since the beginning of these mass introductions of evidence coming from cases 3 and 4. We're preparing the trial at the same time that we're actually conducting the trial. So the preparation of the investigation of 3 and 4 is ongoing at the same time that we're conducting case 2-2, but we're not party to the investigation. I have a lot to say on this subject, but since I'm limited in time, I would just like to say that if the Chamber intends to bring a new witness, once again, who was known at least to the other parties, because the co-prosecutor knows of it since 2012, but if the Chamber expects and intends to bring this witness, we need to have time to prepare, we need to have the audio versions that go with it. And the Chamber needs to take into account this massive introduction of new evidence, because we need to be able to discuss the conditions under which we will be writing our final conclusions. So this is both very important and very symbolic, because these latest decisions by the Chamber, we need to accept that this is very uncomfortable from a legal perspective. Thank you.
Councillor for Nunchi, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I believe it might be useful to give a bit of context in respect of who this witness was or is, whom we're talking about. It is apparently a distant rather distant family member of East Zone leader Sao Pim, and apparently a medic at the hospital belonging to East Zone Division 4. Division 4 was an important military division of the East Zone and was run by a person that everyone knows in this courtroom, Heng Samrin. As the Chamber is aware, we have a different position as to calling witnesses from cases 3 or 4. We have frequently asked ourselves for witnesses. So there is no problem in this particular person coming. Is he significant, as the prosecution is saying? We don't believe so. We have read his WRI, and he is not really, it seems, to be in any position to give answers to some very crucial developments and events in the East Zone in May '78 and before. He is apparently, in the view of the Chamber, he's someone who is going to be testifying about the armed conflict. I'm not quite sure whether he could also testify about the topic of purges in the East Zone. That I'm not sure about, but I suspect he can. But the bigger problem, of course, is that he is, to put it colloquially, completely small fries compared to the people that are really important and who should come to testify in this courtroom. If it's all right with you, Mr. President, let me refer the Chamber to one or two very interesting paragraphs of a minority opinion of one of who we believe one of the most important and respectable judges in the field of international criminal law. The Belgian judge van den Wijngaard said in her minority opinion in the Katanga case a few things about the problem of missing evidence. Missing evidence is, in this case, as we all know, something of crucial importance. She says in paragraph 148 of her minority opinion, and I quote, "The complete absence of evidence from those who were really at the center of things at the time inevitably creates the impression that essential information is missing from the record. Conclusions reached on the basis of such incomplete evidence are inherently fragile and uncertain and cannot suffice for the standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt." On so many occasions, we have requested this Chamber to summons the most important witnesses in this case, the most important witnesses in relation to the events in the East Zone, in relation to the armed conflict. We've asked many, many times to this Chamber to call Heng Samrin, to call Prime Minister Hun Sen, to call Uk Boon Chun, to call Paul Sarun, to call Pen Sovan. They are the ones who are really important when it comes to giving evidence about the events that we are speaking about today, yesterday, and for the past 9 years. So now, asking our submissions on this nephew of Sao Pim who might say something. I'm happy if he comes. If he doesn't come, it's fine too. What really is important, Mr. President, is that the witnesses that I just mentioned are coming to this courtroom and give evidence.
I'd like to hand the floor to Judge Laverne.
Yes, Counsel Guisset, this is a question of interest to you. We've heard your objections, but we also have heard that if necessary you would need more time. Could you quantify the time that you would need for the preparation for this possible witness?
Ça va dépendre du moment où nous
It would depend on the time at which we would receive the audio cassettes related to this witness. Judge Laverne, because we no longer have the number of the request in front of us that we submitted recently, but at the time that we receive all of these audio cassettes, audio recordings, at that point we could evaluate, but at this time I'm not able to tell you how much time we would need.
Co-prosecutor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was brief because I'm rather surprised at what I have heard from across the aisle here. So let me respond to some of the incredible things we've just heard. First, that this person is not significant. You just heard a complete misstatement of this person's positions. He was not a medic in a hospital. He was the chairman of the regiment hospital. And on the 25th of May, 1978, when all the other leading cadres in this zone were purged, he was promoted to regiment commander. So I cannot, for the life of me, understand someone saying this was not a significant person. His interviews speak for himself, which is, assume, what caught the eye of the trial chamber. The complaint about these interviews being disclosed, they were disclosed because they relate to and talk about various people in the East Zone who the defense have said is a key part of what they are interested in this case. That's why they were disclosed. I'm not surprised that the Nunchea defense would agree to this person being called. They're using it as an opportunity to bring up another issue, which I don't want to be drawn into at any length now because it's not the issue your honors are deciding. And most importantly, the notion that this court of the Q-Sampan team complaining, chiding this chamber because it has the nerve to suggest and want to hear a witness is remarkable to me. This is an investigative trial chamber. This is a search for the truth. If your honors think this witness will help you in ascertaining the truth, the witness should be called. These vague procedural objections we constantly hear from the Q-Sampan team are trivial. There can certainly be enough time for people to prepare. We're talking about one witness here with a few not that long interviews. So certainly this is not a scenario in which you are calling someone to appear tomorrow. That would be prejudice. I'm sure you're going to give the parties ample time to prepare should you determine to hear from this person. Your honors have a duty here not to box yourself into an investigation that was conducted quite a few years ago, but to take advantage where new significant witnesses have come up. And if you feel that this person will help you ascertain the truth, and it looks to us like it is someone that can do that, the witness should be called.
Thank you, co-prosecutor, and the chamber would like to thank all parties for their observations. And I noticed that the defense counsel of Q-Sampan is on her feet. Please be brief.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Just for 2 comments to respond to the prosecution. First, if they felt that this witness was so important, they could have made an 87-4 request and asked for him to appear. They haven't done it, so we must believe that for the prosecution it wasn't so important. And also what we've heard today and what I've been saying for a while, this is absolutely not new, but the date today is 15 September 2016.
Thank you, Counsel. And the Chamber thanks the parties for your observations. The Chamber will use your observation as a basis for our decision. I'd like now to hand the floor to the co-prosecutor to question the witness. And the combined time for the prosecutors and the lead co-lawyers is 2 sessions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I want to start just with some quick follow-up on your background before being assigned to S21. You testified that you were initially assigned to be a photographer while you were in Division 703. And what I don't understand is what was the purpose of people being photographers in a military division like 703? But what is it that you were assigned to photograph while you were in Division 703?
Allow me to be a bit in detail regarding this point. Initially, I was disabled because I was wounded and I was sent to hospital. Then I disliked the way I was treated. So, since we were discriminated based on the unit that we were in, for example, the 50-man unit was given different food from the 100-man unit. And after I could walk, I went to the common dining hall. Some wounded people say they asked for salt because the soup was a bit plain, but it was refused. And I became angry that we were all fighting at the front battlefield. How come we were so discriminated? And why the other 2 tables were provided with good food? So my feeling was known to others. And about an hour later, Moon alias Rutter came, and he sent his messenger to fetch me to see him at his house. And he warned me that I should be careful, otherwise I would be injected with some liquid and I would die. And in the afternoon, when a medic came to give me an injection, I refused to take it. And then I told the medic that next day I would discharge myself. And that was the day that I left the hospital, and it was incidentally the day that Phnom Penh fell. And I met him at the provincial town hall of Kondal. I was called to meet him, and he asked me to seize some vehicles and motorbikes as war spoils. And after that, he took me along to Tanat's location, and Tanat assigns me to be a photographer at Division 703 from that day onward.
I understand that it was because you were injured that you were ended up in this position. What I don't understand is why did Division 703 need photographers? What is it that you were to photograph when you were in Division 703?
I did not know the reason behind that. I saw many cameras there, and they told me that I needed to use those cameras to take photos to keep us archived.
Did you ever take any photographs before you were assigned to S21?
At that time, I did not yet possess all the photography skills. Initially, they recruited 6 of us, and later on, 3 of them among us were sent to study in China, while the other 3, including me, remained. And we find people in the locality to help us interpret the language of how to operate camera.
Well, let me ask you something about your training to become a photographer. You say in your OCIJ interview E3 7639, Khmer ERN 0016278, English 00162732, French 0033874. This is what you told OCIJ, quote, "I never went to study in China. I studied on the job from colleagues," end of quote. Who were the colleagues who taught you to be a photographer?
At that time, taking photo was an easy job, but the difficult task was developing the negatives. So at that time, we sought help from the photographers of the old regime who were evicted from Phnom Penh to the rural areas. So we asked help from them.
And how did you find those people?
We met them through Tanat. Tanat was the commander of the division, and we sought help through him to find people who could translate the foreign language on how to use the camera.
And is that how you learned to develop from reading the manuals that came along with the cameras in the foreign language, or by having those translated for you? Was that the source of your information?
At that time, at the time when I was learning, I was also practicing. They translated it for me, and I started to practice it, and we achieved a good result. And I also learned how to develop the negative picture based on my real practice.
Mr. President, I'm about to turn to a new subject. If you wish to break now, it's a convenient spot.
President, thank you, Deputy Co-Prosecutor. The chamber will take a 20 minutes break from now. The court is now in recess.